We need to talk about Nick Norwitz and Dr. Ids, or better known as Dr. Idiot, frankly, by anyone sensible. You may have recently heard, and I'm a little late to the party, that Nick Norwitz and Dr. Ids have had a dispute. First, it was initiated and instigated, really, by Dr. Ids. What a shock. The provocative and offensive moron, or as he likes to say, medical doctor, master's in nutritional research, board-certified lifestyle medicine, which of course are just appeals to authority, because in reality that doesn't mean anything, and we all know that today. I mean, one of the experts not failed us in the last 10 years especially, as I often say. This person, I believe, is vegan. If not vegan, then he's quite plant-based, because he believes that the science says that you ought to be, as if the science says anything. But that's the story for another day, because in reality, that's not what this video is about. What this video is about is, frankly, Nick's approach to this. Now, first of all, Nick doesn't seem to be acting in an intellectually honest way here either, just to be extremely frank. There's a reason that I don't really talk about Nick Norwitz on my channel, okay? He's a censorious, or rather sensational, influencer and content creator about the carnivore diet in the carnivore space, because he knows that that's going to garner him a following, and it's been doing so. They're very dopaminergic, captivating videos, they're very fast-paced, etc., which is all fine, as long as what you're doing is not simply for the fame and for the views, and I really think that what he's doing is for the views. We must remember that he's not a carnivore. He doesn't think we're carnivores. He thinks we're omnivores. He doesn't think that carbs are bad for you. He doesn't think that fiber is bad for you. He doesn't really think that anything is bad for you at all, frankly, besides, of course, the ultra-processed foods and the seed oils, right? Which everyone kind of agrees is not something that you should be eating. Anyway, he doesn't really seem to be acting in a good faith way either, considering the fact that they're actively having a conversation, or at least were, about having a debate or an Instagram live debate, whatever it may be, and it seems that Nick was avoiding, but Nick posted on his page a photo of him sending him something on August 7th before Dr. Ids even knew who he was, showing that Dr. Ids never opened the message and never really agreed to whatever. That's ridiculous, frankly, and you're not doing the carnivore space any good by doing that. However, there was a response video that Nick made to Dr. Ids that I thought really needed some commentary. Nick was being extremely anodyne. He was giving too much grace to Dr. Ids.
I just watched Dr. Ids' response video to me with amusement and intrigue. I have to say, it was pretty well done, although manipulative. Now, I don't think that was intentional. I think he overlooked what I was actually saying, maybe because of a veil of his own bias.
And at first I thought, well, maybe that's just because he's giving way too much of a benefit of the doubt to Dr. Ids. In fact, I actually wrote a comment, and I won't read all of it, but basically what the end says is, not only did you give him an inappropriate benefit of the doubt, you're lying to yourself. You know he did what he did intentionally. Please step it up. I mean this with all due respect. And I do. I mean it with all due respect. So before people think that I'm just simply being a contrarian, you know, just objecting to anybody and everything because of some narcissistic, solipsistic tendencies, let me explain why this really bothers me. This anodyne, inoffensive approach, and further explaining implicitly why I approach these situations the way I do. There's a certain side of the aisle, and I'm not really talking about politics, however, there's a major crossover here, and it's becoming even more of a crossover the more and more people wake up to the fact that we are living in a health crisis, that believes in principles. They are principled. They have a set of moral values that they follow. Not only moral values, because that once again bleeds more into politics than health, but also just objective values. What science can say, what science cannot say, and really what we should say instead of say is indicate, because data doesn't say anything. Scientists do. We're also aware of what other types of sciences can indicate, right? Because we are aware that there's not just one type of science. If anything, the type of science that I'm referring to is not really science in the first place, because science requires control, right? But then there's the other side. And what they do is they pretend that if they were in power, that, well, they would act principally. But as soon as they have the momentum going, as soon as they are in the majority, they throw those values out the window. They throw those principles out the window and walk all over the other side. And it's just a back and forth. And we believe that the more that we stick to these strictures, these disciplined strictures, and we remain disciplined, that somehow we will prevail. Because on principle, if you stick to your principles, this is one of the principles actually, that you will prevail. Except that's clearly not been shown. What you have to do is you have to eventually, after you've been betrayed and burned multiple times, throw those principles out the window, throw them out the window for just a second and fight fire with fire. Because there is a breaking point. There is a final screw it, to put it lightly. We are not going to take this anymore. And if you want to fight fire against us, then we'll fight back with fire, basically. And so this approach is ineffective. These people will walk all over you. Lending out an open hand is not always appropriate. Turning the other cheek and remaining silent because you're somehow better than the other approach is, and therefore you don't want to be rude or risk being rude or perceived as rude, is the best way of going about these situations. That's not true. There is a time to be angry, and there's a time to let that anger manifest in a way that is conducive to having your side, the principled side, win. Then you can implement the principles back in. Okay, we have hit that point. We hit that point in 2020, actually. So until it's over, it's not over. We must be militant. We must be perhaps a little overbearing, and most importantly, unapologetic in that approach. It doesn't mean to haphazardly lose your temper and start screaming things in an inarticulate, non-measured way. It's still important to be tactical. It's still important to be adroit with your language and specific, but it does mean that you need to be able to be militant. You cannot be a doormat, okay? And I fear that this approach that Nick Norwitz is employing is going to give a very bad look to the carnivore space. And so then it puts a pressure on me to stand up against it and say, hey, I object to this approach. You need to treat it differently. Frankly, I am not very familiar with Dr. Idz. You may be fairly surprised at the fact that despite how much I have poured through certain aspects of science in this space and the culture and the social media and the community, that I am constantly unaware of who these people are. And there's a reason for that. It's because I don't really care about who they are. What I care about is what they say. And what I know is that Dr. Idz, every single time that I have encountered him in my feed, or if someone sends me a video of his, is always completely off base. Not every single thing he says is a bad point, however, and I've acknowledged as much. In fact, in the video that he was just posting, the one that instigated this whole thing, he said that Nick Norwitz cited a paper that I've actually cited in my book, but I didn't really put too much weight on it. That actually goes for a lot of the citations in my book. I don't put too much emphasis on them, for reasons that you may understand if you've watched my channel long enough, which was a study done out of Harvard that was a 2,029 person respondent data set involving people on a carnivore diet. And the selection bias was immense, considering the fact that these people were selected based on carnivore tribes online and subreddits. Massive selection bias. If you understand statistics, you know that that's a massive selection bias. That was a major point that Dr. Idz stated, and he's absolutely 100% correct. However, his conclusions are just clearly erroneous. And not only that, he is offensive as And frankly, I just recently posted on my Instagram story a post by Dr. Tro showing that in the past, Dr. Idz has also been, well, held responsible for doing some slightly, to be fair, nefarious things with his content, being paid by a company to basically promote and say certain things on his platform, which is never, ever a good thing. Anyway, just wanted to cover that. We need to be more militant in the space, and we need to be more competitive. I am, once again, not saying to use ad hominem attacks, berate opponents, just because they're on the opposite side. That would be a dangerous message. What I'm saying is that you cannot, if we want to win this fight, be sort of in a way complacent. So it's just a suggestion at the end of the day. You may have disagreements. Comment below your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one, where perhaps we'll react to Dr. Idz. Or someone else that, once again, believes themselves remotely competent to speak upon the area of human nutrition science, despite the fact that inferential statistics is actually quite uninformative, especially in the area of nutrition science. So, till then.